Right, so only Keir Starmer could make a big announcement that the vast majority of us would get on board with and agree with, but managed to do it in such a way that we all still ended up hating him for it instead. Palestinian recognition by the UK is decades overdue. But instead of just doing it, and doing it now, the brylcreemed berk decides to put arbitrary conditions on it that both incentivise Israel to go faster and harder in their genocide and their annexation plans, whilst also offering himself a way out of Palestinian recognition by the time we get to September, which is when he's decided this is actually going to happen. Israel has essentially been told to scale back its genocide and its apartheid to an acceptable level, or the UK will finally side with their victims instead. He's given Israel the power to prevent the UK from recognising Palestine. So who is actually in charge here? What Starmer has done here is beyond just unacceptable. It is utterly grotesque. The Palestinian people have a right to self-determination. That is not a bargaining chip to be used to put pressure on their oppressors to end their forced starvation. And given Starmer has also apparently told MPs that Palestinian recognition was not going to be conditional before then going ahead and putting these sociopathic conditions on them, and with the litany of lies that have come to define Starmer's leadership of Labour for the last 5 years, why should we believe any of this is going to happen anyway? Right, so children are starving to death in Gaza. The World Food Programme, the United Nations agencies have warned that famine thresholds have been exceeded, with malnutrition amongst children skyrocketing and preventable deaths due to it mounting daily. More than 60,000 Palestinians have now been killed during 21 months of relentless bombardment and siege by Israel, according to Palestinian and UN data. Entire neighbourhoods have been razed, water and electricity cut off, aid convoys attacked, hospitals destroyed. Yet even amidst all of this, the UK's Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has announced that he will wait until September before the UK will recognise the state of Palestine, and even then, he's put conditions on it. Starmer's pledge was presented as a diplomatic watershed moment. This was big. He was going to do something we could all agree with him over at last. He stated that the UK would formally recognise a Palestinian state. Unfortunately, it got followed by a series of big buts. It wouldn't happen until the United Nations General Assembly in September, giving Israel another 2 months to do their worst, essentially. But then came the bigger but. That is, unless Israel took substantive steps to end the war in Gaza, allow humanitarian aid in, halt West Bank annexation, and commit to a credible peace process. Palestinian recognition, therefore, has been put in the hands of their oppressors, who want anything but that to happen, but equally, they don't want to take orders from a political pygmy like Keir Starmer either. What is already a long overdue step, Starmer has screwed up horribly. He is the most inept and incompetent of politicians. It truly is a wonder to behold how one politician can be so bad at politics. Why is 21 months not long enough already? Palestinians are dying of starvation daily now, and have been for months and months, for families fleeing bombed out homes in Rafah or Deir al-Balah or Gaza City or anywhere else in the Strip. Starmer's words offer nothing but a chilling deadline. They are 2 more months to try and survive, while the UK waits for their oppressor to moderate its genocide to an acceptable level of genocide. That is the inference, is it not? Starmer deems there to be an acceptable level of genocide. The former human rights lawyer, let's not forget, he never did believe in anything but the money and the prestige of that job, did he? He can't have done, not after this, surely. It really is hard to imagine a more grotesque inversion of morality and law. Palestinian statehood is not a bargaining chip to be dangled before Israel. It is not a diplomatic carrot designed to coax a genocidal regime into slightly less depraved behaviour. Under international law, the Palestinian people's right to self-determination is inalienable. The UN Charter, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, UN General Assembly Resolution 1514 of 1960. Pick another. There's plenty of these rules and regs to choose from because all of them are unequivocal. All peoples have the right to freely determine their political status. That right does not depend on the consent of their coloniser, nor can it be suspended whilst they are starved and slaughtered. Starmer's conditionality is more than a delay, therefore. It's a psychotic betrayal. It hands Israel, the very state committing the genocide, the power to prevent Palestinian recognition should it choose to. It emboldens Israel not to stop actually, but to escalate its campaign more quickly, knowing it has a window to complete its destruction before Starmer will actually do anything, before September. And it betrays the UK's obligations under international law to act to end, not enable, atrocities. The starting point for any serious discussion must be in the law, and of course we know that Starmer knows the law. Article 1 of the UN Charter commits member states to respect the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples. It's the first one. Even if Starmer skimmed this thing, you can't miss the first one, can you? This principle is reiterated in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the ICCPR, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, the ICESCR. UN General Assembly Resolution 1514 of 1960 that I mentioned a moment ago further declares all peoples have the right to self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social and cultural development. There's no asterisk there that denotes a footnote exemption. Self-determination is not conditional on whether the occupying power behaves itself to an arbitrary, acceptable degree. It is not something to be earned by progress or good conduct by the oppressor. International law is clear. It is black and white. Occupation, annexation and colonisation do not extinguish the right to self-determination. So by making UK recognition of Palestine contingent on Israeli actions, Starmer has inverted that principle. He is in breach of all of those rules and regs. He has given Israel a veto over them, essentially, in the UK's view. If Israel agrees to halt annexation, allow humanitarian aid, enter credible peace talks even, to an extent the UK deems to be arbitrarily acceptable, and we don't know by what measure Starmer is measuring this by, the UK will delay recognition further. If it does not, recognition will happen, but only after the September UN General Assembly, and only if, frankly, you trust Starmer to follow through with it anyway. I can quite easily believe Israel can do nothing of the sort, and he'll still say otherwise and not recognise Palestine. He's lied too often about too many things to not think like that. This is a profound betrayal of law and morality. Everything Starmer built his reputation and career on, supposedly. It tells Palestinians that their rights are not rights at all, but diplomatic leverage to be traded at the convenience of London and Tel Aviv. It tells Israel that its crimes will be tolerated as long as they are not too brazen. And it tells the world that Britain, the former colonial power that helped engineer Palestinian disposition to begin with, still believes it can decide when the Palestinian people are allowed to exist. Starmer has tried to have it both ways. In his public statement, he said recognition was not in Israel's gift, echoing the language of international law. But the conditions he has imposed means precisely that. Recognition will only be confirmed if Israel fails to meet his arbitrary benchmarks. This contradiction has not gone unnoticed. On another point, Labour MP Dawn Butler has revealed that MPs were briefed that recognition of Palestine would be unconditional, only to be blindsided by the announcement of conditionality now. How often must Starmer lie before you start not taking him at his word on anything at all? It is part of a broader pattern with him. Starmer was elected Labour leader on 10 pledges that he has since long abandoned: public ownership, defending free movement, ending NHS outsourcing, and a whole lot more. His handling of Palestine follows exactly the same trajectory. Offer bold-sounding commitments, then water them down to appease powerful interests and vested interests. His record on Palestinian rights is especially damning. In a now infamous October 2023 interview with LBC, which I'm sure we've all heard, Starmer endorsed Israel's right to cut off water and electricity to Gaza, an act of collective punishment prohibited by Article 33 of the 4th Geneva Convention. He should know all about that, shouldn't he, the former human rights lawyer? But still he said this, and he's never apologised for that statement, even though it's all caught on film. Even as the siege of Gaza has become a textbook case of starvation as a weapon of war, under his leadership, Labour has purged pro-Palestinian voices, banned conference motions using the word apartheid, and aligned itself closely with pro-Israel lobbying groups. This context matters, because it shows that Starmer's September pledge is not an isolated misjudgment, but part of a broader hostility to Palestinian rights, all dressed up in the language of pragmatism. Starmer's September deadline was not even a show of real leadership. It was just jumping on someone else's bandwagon as usual as well. It mirrors the timeline set by French President Emmanuel Macron, who also announced that France would recognise Palestine at the UN General Assembly. Malta has since followed suit as well. Starmer is not leading, he's not a leader. He's following, he's a sheep, and he's even screwing that up. He's shown no willingness to chart an independent course before now rooted in principle. Instead, he's outsourced moral responsibility to others, and now he's just following suit. Starmer's defenders call this diplomacy, but true diplomacy requires courage, the courage to confront allies, break with consensus, and act when others hesitate. Starmer is doing the opposite. He is a shiver looking for a spine. He's only tough when he's punching down on the elderly or the disabled. He's hiding behind Macron's coattails, waiting for France and the EU to move first, and they've been too slow as well as it is. Every single day of delay allows Israel to escalate its campaign in Gaza and the West Bank, to demolish more homes, expand more settlements, and make Palestinian statehood even more unviable, no matter how much Starmer sticks to claims of backing a two-state solution, which is functionally dead and buried already, along with at least 60,000 people in Gaza. Critics have rightly warned that the September deadline gives Israel a perverse incentive. It has 2 months to finish the job, as it were, before recognition becomes perhaps unavoidable. It tells Israel, if you can make Gaza uninhabitable and fragment the West Bank before September, Palestinian statehood will be a meaningless gesture. And this isn't crystal ball gazing either, as the likes of Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir have openly called for permanent displacement of Palestinians and annexation of the West Bank. Netanyahu now having offered Smotrich, by way of appeasement, annexation of chunks of Gaza now as well. Giving them a window to act is reckless in the extreme, yet Starmer's gone ahead and done it. Israel's reaction to Starmer's announcement, though, was nonetheless swift and hostile, because, of course it is. You can't ever say anything mean to them. They can't handle that, can they? Netanyahu accused Starmer of rewarding Hamas's monstrous terrorism and punishing its victims, warning that a jihadist state on Israel's border today will threaten Britain tomorrow, and that appeasement towards jihadist terrorists always fails. Starmer's office said he reiterated that there is no equivalence between Israel and Hamas, while demanding Hamas release all hostages, sign a ceasefire, disarm, and accept that it will play no role in the government of Gaza. No, there's no equivalent, is there? 1,200 Israelis died on the night of October 7th, 2023. Not that there is any excusing or minimising of that, but 60,000 Palestinians have died at Israel's hands since. So you're right, there is no equivalence, is there? This rejection creates an immediate dilemma for Starmer, all of his own making, and if he had any political nous, he would have seen it coming. If Israel refuses to meet his conditions, will he follow through and recognise Palestine in September at all? Or will he retreat, as I would frankly put money on, citing insufficient progress and pushing the deadline into the long grass? If he fails to act now, his hypocrisy will be undeniable. If France and Malta follow through, he'll be exposed as even more of a shameless fool. He will have handed Israel a veto over Palestinian rights and then obeyed that veto. He will have shown that there is literally nothing Israel can't do, no number of dead children, no level of famine that will force Britain to uphold international law against them. So this is now a test for Starmer, because Israel won't walk back on what they are doing. We know they won't. So if he doesn't follow through in September, the political fallout deserves to be catastrophic for him, and it must be. Recognition is not just a symbolic gesture. It carries real obligations with it. Under international law, once the UK recognises Palestine as a state, it must respect Palestinian sovereignty. This means treating Gaza, the West Bank and East Jerusalem as inviolable, and ending any UK policy that aids annexation or occupation. Hamas are still the government of Gaza, so Starmer's rhetoric and obviously their prescription here in the UK, at least to their political arm, the governing arm when it comes to Gaza, would seem completely contradictory under such conditions, wouldn't it? The UK must also end complicity in war crimes, end all arms sales, all intelligence sharing, all financial assistance that could be used in occupation or genocide would then be illegal under the Genocide Convention and Geneva Conventions. It is notable, actually, that surveillance flights from RAF Akrotiri have apparently now officially ended. That's come from Matt Kennard of Declassified UK, so I'm quite prepared to believe that. That is particularly notable right now, it does have to be said. Recognition would nonetheless require the UK to end trade with settlement goods and prohibit British companies from operating in occupied areas. It would also require the UK to pursue accountability for crimes committed in Palestine, including through universal jurisdiction and cooperation with the International Criminal Court. This is why recognition has been delayed for decades. It would force Britain to confront its own complicity and break with the United States, which has consistently shielded Israel from accountability. Starmer's conditionality can therefore be seen as a way of avoiding these obligations. By dangling recognition as a bargaining chip, he hopes to appear principled without having to act in the end. It's why I don't believe, no matter what, that he will follow through with this. But I will be delighted to be proven wrong. Britain's relationship to Palestinian dispossession is not new either. As David Lammy has said, Britain bears a special burden of responsibility to recognise the state of Palestine due to its historic role in the region. from the Balfour Declaration of 1917 to the British mandate's facilitation of Zionist colonisation, the UK has played a central and unique role in creating the conditions for the Nakba and the creation of Israel itself. It has since armed and diplomatically shielded Israel through decades of occupation and apartheid. Starmer's delay is part of this legacy. It reflects the UK's subservience to US policy, which views Palestinian statehood as a bargaining chip and not a right. It also reflects the European bloc's desire to manage optics rather than enforce law. France, Malta and now the UK have all set the same September deadline, revealing a coordinated effort to look tough on Israel without taking the immediate action which is already woefully overdue. So shame on all of them. Because this is not diplomacy, it's moral cowardice. It's the refusal to confront a genocidal ally because doing so would disrupt arms sales and intelligence cooperation and the West's strategic alignment in the Middle East. What emerges from all of this is a portrait of a man who is not leading. Starmer is following, the empty suit of a man that he is. He's following Macron, he's following Washington, following the European consensus. He's triangulating between pro-Palestinian MPs and activists on one side and Israel's defenders on the other, and we know whose side he's really on. This is why his September deadline pleases absolutely nobody. Pro-Palestinian voices see it for what it is, a delay that allows the genocide to continue. Israel's government sees it as appeasement of Hamas, and Starmer himself will be trapped in September, forced either to act and face Israel's fury or retreat and confirm that his promise was always a lie and a sham. A leader with courage would recognise Palestine now, unconditionally, and pair that recognition with concrete measures of sanctions, of arms embargoes, full support for ICC investigations. Starmer is doing none of this. If Starmer fails to follow through in September, the consequences will be devastating for Palestinians and for the UK's credibility. Therefore, it must also be catastrophic for Starmer personally. It will show that Britain is willing to ignore famine, mass killing and apartheid rather than confronting Israel. It will deepen Labour's rupture with its base, particularly Muslim communities who already feel betrayed. And it will send a message to the world that international law is meaningless when the victims are Palestinians. The moral consequences are even graver. Starmer's conditionality legitimises collective punishment and teaches future perpetrators that they can earn diplomatic rewards by moderating their atrocities just enough to appease them. It entrenches the idea that Palestinian rights are somehow uniquely negotiable when nobody else's are. Recognition of Palestine is not a reward, it is not leverage, it is not a diplomatic carrot to coax Israel into behaving when they won't. It's a legal and moral obligation that is decades overdue. By making recognition conditional, Starmer has betrayed this principle. It is grotesque, it is disgusting, it is the most scumbag move this grotesque Prime Minister has ever committed. He has handed the genocidaire the power to veto its victims' right to exist. He has set a deadline that incentivises escalation, and he has shown yet again that he lacks any courage to lead. History will not be kind to this degree of cowardice. When the famine is documented in all of its horror in the history books to come, when the graves of children get counted, when Gaza is remembered as a place that was deliberately made uninhabitable, no one will remember the clever diplomatic triangulation of Keir Starmer in July of 2025. They will remember that Britain, faced with genocide, told the victims, just wait 2 more months, and maybe we'll recognise that you're human. That's not diplomacy, that's complicity, and it's unforgivable. And I'll never forgive him for this. And if you don't want to take my word for all of this, then please don't. Take the word of people in Israel themselves instead as to what their own nation is doing, because reports from the Israeli human rights groups B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights Israel have now directly accused their own state of genocide and lay out with precision and legal detail as to why that is, and it is unassailable. And by rights, it should finish Netanyahu off for good. Check out all the details of that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as spreading the word and helping to support the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated, holding power to account for ordinary working class people, and I will hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers folks.